The stranger rode into Kelton, Utah on a Tuesday morning in August of 1882, and Miranda Bennett watched from behind the dusty window of the general store, her heart already braced for another day of whispered insults and turned backs. She had stopped expecting kindness 6 months ago when Thomas Hartley, the man she had once planned to marry, had torn her reputation to shreds with lies so vicious that even the church women refused to meet her eyes anymore. The cowboy on the black gelding looked road-worn and tired, his hat pulled low against the relentless sun, and Miranda turned away before anyone could accuse her of improper behavior for simply looking at a man. She kept her head down as she walked through the aisles, gathering the few supplies she needed with hands that had learned not to tremble anymore. The proprietor, Mr. Gunderson, took her money without a word, his lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. She had worked in his store for 3 years before Thomas started spreading his poison, and now he could barely stand to touch the coins she placed on the counter. Miranda gathered her parcels and headed for the door, keeping her eyes fixed on the rough wooden planks beneath her feet. The heat hit her like a wall when she stepped outside, the August sun merciless in this high desert country where Kelton had sprung up along the railroad line. She had grown up here, knew every building and every face, and now she felt like a ghost haunting the place that had once been home. Thomas had made sure of that. When she had discovered he was stealing from his employer and confronted him privately, he had turned the tables with a cruelty she had never imagined possible. Within a week, the entire town believed she had been meeting men secretly, taking money for favors, betraying Thomas with half the ranch hands in the territory. None of it was true, but truth did not matter when a respected man with a charming smile told elaborate lies with tears in his eyes. She was halfway to her small rented room at the edge of town when she heard the boots behind her. "You dropped this, madam." Miranda turned slowly, expecting mockery or worse. The cowboy from earlier stood a respectful distance away, holding out a small package that must have slipped from her bundle. Up close, she could see he was young, probably no more than 25, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water in spring. His face was honest, open, and when he looked at her there was no judgment in his gaze. "Thank you," she said quietly, reaching for the package. Their fingers brushed for just a moment, and she saw him notice the calluses on her hands, the mended patch on her sleeve, the way she stood like someone expecting a blow. "Lucas Zimmerman," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Just got into town. I am looking for work at one of the ranches." "Good luck to you then," Miranda said, because she knew what would happen once he mentioned her name to anyone in Kelton. She started to turn away, but his voice stopped her. "Could you point me toward a decent place to eat?" The ride from Wyoming was long. She should have walked away. Every instinct screamed at her to avoid giving this town more ammunition against her. But something in his tired smile made her pause, made her remember what it felt like to be treated like a normal human being. "The boarding house on 3rd Street has hot meals. Mrs. Patterson is a good cook." "Much appreciated," Lucas said, and he seemed to mean it. He tipped his hat again and headed in the direction she had indicated, leading his horse by the reins with an easy confidence that spoke of years in the saddle. Miranda continued to her room, but she found herself thinking about the cowboy with the kind eyes for the rest of the afternoon. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her with simple courtesy that the brief exchange felt like water in the desert. She tried to push the thought away as she mended clothes by the small window, taking in sewing and washing to survive now that no respectable business would hire her. Thomas had been thorough in his destruction, and the town had believed every word because he came from a prominent family, while she was just an orphan who had aged out of charity, 3 days passed before she saw Lucas Zimmerman again. She was at the town well, drawing water in the early morning when fewer people were about, when she heard angry voices from the street. A group of men stood outside the saloon, and Thomas Hartley was among them, his handsome face animated with righteous indignation. Miranda's stomach clenched with familiar dread. "I am just saying the man should know what kind of woman she is," Thomas was saying, his voice carrying clearly in the still morning air. "Before he makes a fool of himself like I did, trusting her." "Maybe a man should form his own opinions," a quieter voice replied, and Miranda recognized Lucas Zimmerman's steady tone. "Instead of listening to gossip." "Gossip?" Thomas's voice rose with manufactured outrage. "I was engaged to that woman. I know exactly what she is. She was meeting men behind my back, taking their money. I have witnesses." Miranda felt the familiar shame wash over her, even though every word was a lie. She should leave, should disappear before this got worse, but her hands seemed frozen on the well rope. "Funny thing about witnesses," Lucas said, and his voice had gone cold as winter ice. "I have been in town less than a week, and I have heard 3 different versions of your story. Details keep changing. But the core accusation stays the same, which tells me you practice that part real careful like." There was a moment of stunned silence. Miranda found herself moving closer, drawn by the sound of someone defending her for the first time in 6 months. "Are you calling me a liar?" Thomas demanded, his hand moving toward his hip. He wore a pistol these days, an affectation he had adopted to make himself seem more dangerous. "I am saying I have known men like you," Lucas replied, and there was steel beneath the quiet words. "Men who ruin a woman's name because it is easier than facing their own sins. You have got the whole town believing your story, but you have not got me convinced." Miranda stepped around the corner of the building, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "Stop," she said, her voice shakier than she wanted. "Please, just stop." Both men turned to look at her. Thomas's expression flickered with something ugly before settling back into wounded righteousness. Lucas's face remained calm, but his eyes found hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Miss Bennett," Thomas said, loading her name with disdain. "Still sneaking around, I see. Some habits do not change." "I am not sneaking anywhere," Miranda said, forcing herself to stand straight. "I came to draw water from the public well, which is my right same as anyone." "A right you have abused along with every other freedom you were given," Thomas shot back. "Lucas, I am trying to save you from making the same mistake I did. That woman is poison." "Then it is my mistake to make," Lucas said flatly. He turned his back on Thomas, a deliberate insult in this country where reputation meant everything. He walked toward Miranda with that same easy confidence, and when he reached her side, he touched his hat brim. "Morning, Miss Bennett." "Could I help you carry that water?" Miranda stared at him, unable to comprehend what was happening. No one had offered to help her with anything in months. No one had even spoken to her in public if they could avoid it. "You should not," she whispered. "You heard what he said. The whole town believes him." "Then the whole town is wrong," Lucas said simply. He took the bucket from the well and began filling it with steady, practiced movements. "Been working at the Copper Creek Ranch this week. Boss seems fair, work is honest, and I have got a place to sleep. But I got to tell you, this town has something rotten in it. Took me about 2 days to figure out the rot started with Thomas Hartley." "You do not know what you are doing," Miranda said, but hope was unfurling in her chest like a flower that had been too long without sun. "He will turn everyone against you too." "Let him try," Lucas said. He finished filling the bucket and lifted it easily, waiting for her to lead the way. "I have been on my own since I was 16. Had to learn real quick how to read people, figure out who is lying and who is telling truth. Your ex, he has got the smooth talk down, but he looks away when he is spinning his tales. And he has got more new clothes and a fancy pistol that do not match his salary. Makes a man wonder where the money is coming from. Miranda felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She had stopped crying months ago, refusing to give this town the satisfaction. I caught him stealing from his employer. He was taking money from the ranch accounts, small amounts he thought would not be noticed. When I confronted him, he said he would stop. Instead, he ended our engagement and started telling everyone I was the one who could not be trusted. "You have proof?" Lucas asked as they walked toward her small room. "I had proof," Miranda said bitterly. "Documents I had copied. But my room was broken into a week after he started spreading the lies. Everything was destroyed. And who would believe me anyway? He is a Hartley. His family has been here since Kelton was founded. I am nobody." They reached her door and Lucas set the bucket down carefully. The sun was climbing higher now, and Miranda knew people would be watching, adding this to the list of her supposed transgressions. But Lucas did not seem to care. He stood there in the growing heat, his hat casting shadows across his face, and looked at her like she mattered. "You are not nobody," he said quietly, "and I believe you." Those 4 words broke something open inside her. Miranda felt a tear escape despite her best efforts, and she brushed it away angrily. "You do not even know me." "No, but I know liars. And I know what it looks like when someone has been beaten down for telling the truth." Lucas hesitated, then added, "My mother was accused of being a thief when I was young. Town turned on her same way they turned on you. Took 2 years before the real thief was caught and she was vindicated. But those 2 years nearly killed her. I swore I would never stand by and watch it happen to someone else if I could help it." Miranda looked up at him, really looked at him, and saw not pity but understanding in his eyes. "Why would you risk your reputation here for me? You just got to town. You have work, a fresh start." "Because it is the right thing to do," Lucas said, "and because I see who you really are, not what he says you are, who you actually are." The words hung between them in the hot morning air, and Miranda felt something shift in her chest. For 6 months she had been invisible, a ghost that people looked through or spat at depending on their mood. Now this cowboy with the honest eyes was seeing her, truly seeing her, and it terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Thank you for the water," she managed to say. "But you should go before someone sees us and your reputation is damaged too." "Let them see," Lucas said. He touched his hat brim one more time, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as his particular courtesy. "I will be around if you need anything, Miss Bennett, and I mean that." He walked away with that easy stride, leading his horse back toward the center of town, and Miranda stood frozen in her doorway. She felt like she had been asleep for months and was just beginning to wake up, the numbness receding to reveal both pain and possibility beneath. The next Sunday, Miranda did what she had not done in weeks and went to church. She usually avoided it, unable to bear the cold stares and whispered comments, but something about Lucas's words had rekindled a stubborn spark of defiance in her. She had done nothing wrong, and she was tired of hiding like a criminal. She wore her best dress, mended so many times the fabric was more patch than original cloth, and walked into the small church with her head high. The whispers started immediately. Miranda slid into the back pew, the one no one else wanted because it was near the door and caught all the draft in winter. She folded her hands in her lap and tried to focus on the altar, on anything but the eyes drilling into her back. Reverend Matthews began his sermon about forgiveness and charity, words that apparently did not apply to women accused by prominent men. She was so focused on maintaining her composure that she did not notice Lucas, until he slid into the pew beside her. The whispers increased in volume, shocked murmurs rippling through the congregation. Lucas paid them no mind. He sat with his hat in his hands, his head bowed respectfully, looking for all the world like a man who had every right to sit wherever he chose. Miranda's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him to move to save himself, but she could not make her voice work. Instead, she sat frozen as the service continued, hyper-aware of his solid presence beside her, the way his shoulder almost brushed hers when he reached for the hymnal. When they stood to sing, Lucas held the hymnal between them, and Miranda found herself sharing the pages, their voices joining on the familiar words. His voice was a warm baritone, steady and sure, and for the first time in months she felt like she was part of something instead of an outcast looking in from the cold. After the service, Thomas was waiting outside with several of his friends. His face was flushed with anger, and Miranda recognized the signs of a confrontation brewing. She touched Lucas's arm without thinking, a gesture of warning. "You should leave," she said softly. "He is going to make trouble." "Then let him," Lucas replied, but his voice was gentle. He offered her his arm, a gesture of old-fashioned courtesy that made several of the church women gasp. "May I walk you home, Miss Bennett?" Miranda looked at his arm, then at his face, and made a choice. She placed her hand lightly on his sleeve, feeling the solid muscle beneath the fabric. "Yes, thank you." They walked down the church steps together, and Thomas stepped directly into their path. "You have got a lot of nerve, Zimmerman, coming into our town, taking our jobs, and consorting with a known harlot." The word hit Miranda like a physical blow, but Lucas's arm tensed beneath her hand. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. "You will apologize to the lady." "Lady," Thomas laughed, a harsh sound that made Miranda flinch. "She is no lady. Ask anyone here. They will tell you what she is." "I am asking you to apologize," Lucas repeated. His free hand had moved to his side, hovering near the worn handle of his pistol. Miranda had not even noticed he was armed. "And I am not asking again." The crowd around them had gone silent. Miranda could feel the weight of their attention, could see the calculation in Thomas's eyes as he tried to decide if his pride was worth a gunfight. Finally, self-preservation won out. Thomas stepped aside, but his parting words were poisonous. "You are making a big mistake, Zimmerman. When you figure out what she really is, do not come crying to me." Lucas did not dignify that with a response. He simply guided Miranda past Thomas and down the street, his stride measured and calm despite the tension she could feel vibrating through him. They walked in silence until they reached her small room, and only then did she feel brave enough to speak. "You should not have done that. Thomas has friends, influential friends. They can make your life very difficult here." "They can try," Lucas said. He turned to face her fully, and in the afternoon sunlight she could see gold flecks in his green eyes. "Miss Bennett, I meant what I said the other day. I see who you really are. You are a woman who has been doing her best to survive under impossible circumstances. You hold your head high even when the whole town tries to grind you into the dirt. That takes more courage than anything Thomas Hartley has ever done." Miranda felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. "You do not know me well enough to say that." "Then let me get to know you better," Lucas said. The words were simple, but the invitation behind them made Miranda's heart race. "Have dinner with me tonight. Nothing fancy, just conversation. Let me prove that not everyone in this world is cruel." She should say no. Should protect what little remained of her reputation and not drag this kind man down with her. But Miranda was so tired of being alone, so tired of fighting battles with no allies, that the word that came out was, yes. Lucas's smile transformed his face, making him look younger and impossibly handsome. I will pick you up at 6. We can eat at the boarding house where I am staying. Mrs. Patterson does not hold with gossip, and her pot roast is the best I have had in years." He left her then, and Miranda went inside her small room with her heart beating so hard she felt dizzy. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror over her wash basin and saw her flushed cheeks, her bright eyes, and realized with a start that she looked happy. Actually happy, for the first time in half a year. The afternoon passed in a blur of nervous preparation. Miranda washed her face and hands, brushed her dark hair until it shone, and changed into her other dress, which was slightly less mended than the first. She had no jewelry, no perfume, no way to make herself prettier than she was. But when Lucas knocked on her door at precisely 6 o'clock, the look on his face told her she did not need any of those things. "You look lovely," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her believe him. They walked through town as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. People stared, some with curiosity, others with outright hostility. Miranda tried not to let it bother her, tried to focus on Lucas's easy conversation as he told her about growing up in Wyoming, about learning to break horses and drive cattle, about the wide open spaces that had shaped him. Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was a sturdy 2-story building near the railroad tracks. The widow who ran it greeted them with a warm smile that included Miranda without hesitation, and Miranda felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. They ate pot roast and vegetables in the dining room with several other boarders, and no one treated her like a pariah. It was such a simple thing, eating a meal with other people, but Miranda had not realized how much she missed it until now. After dinner, Lucas walked her home under the emerging stars. The desert night was cooling rapidly, and Miranda wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. They walked slowly, neither seeming eager to end the evening. "Can I ask you something?" Lucas said as they neared her room. What was he really like, Thomas, before everything went wrong? Miranda considered the question carefully. "Charming, attentive. He made me feel special, like I mattered. I think that is what I fell in love with more than the man himself, the feeling of being wanted. I was alone after my parents died, working at the store, just trying to get by. Thomas made me believe I could have more than that." "You deserve more than that," Lucas said firmly. "You deserve someone who sees your strength, your goodness. Not someone who uses you and then destroys you when you become inconvenient." They reached her door, and Miranda turned to face him. In the moonlight, his features were shadowed and striking, and she felt a flutter of something she had not experienced in far too long. Not the desperate gratitude of a drowning person grabbing a rope, but genuine attraction. Lucas Zimmerman was a good man, the kind of man she had thought existed only in stories. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly. "It has been a long time since I felt human." "You are human, Miranda," Lucas said, using her first name for the first time. The intimacy of it sent warmth through her. "You are brave and strong and beautiful, and anyone who cannot see that is a fool." He touched his hat brim in that familiar gesture and turned to leave, but Miranda surprised herself by catching his sleeve. "Lucas, wait. Why are you really doing this? There has to be more to it than just standing up for what is right." Lucas looked down at her hand on his arm, then met her eyes. "Because the moment I saw you in that store, something in me recognized something in you. I cannot explain it better than that. But I know that letting Thomas Hartley destroy you would be letting a light go out in the world, and I have seen enough darkness to know how valuable light is." He left then, and Miranda went inside with tears streaming down her face. But for the first time in 6 months, they were not tears of despair. The following weeks brought changes to Kelton that rippled out like stones thrown in still water. Lucas continued to work at the Copper Creek Ranch, earning a reputation as a skilled hand and a man of his word. And he continued to seek out Miranda's company in ways that were deliberate and public. They ate meals together at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. They walked through town in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. He helped her carry water and supplies, and he treated her with a respect that made others begin to question Thomas's narrative. Because if Lucas Zimmerman, who had proven himself honest and hardworking, believed Miranda Bennett was a good woman, perhaps there was more to the story than Thomas had told them. The shift was subtle at first. A woman at the well nodded to Miranda instead of turning away. Mr. Gunderson at the general store actually spoke to her when taking her money, asking how she was doing. Small cracks in the wall of condemnation that had surrounded her for months. Thomas noticed the change, and it made him vicious. He escalated his campaign of lies, telling anyone who would listen that Miranda had clearly seduced Lucas the same way she had seduced countless others. He implied that Lucas was a fool, that Miranda would drain him dry and move on to her next victim. Some people still believed him, but the chorus of agreement was not as loud as it had been. Miranda was hanging laundry behind her small room one afternoon when she heard footsteps approaching. She turned to find Thomas standing there, and her heart lurched with fear. They had not been alone together since their engagement ended, and the look on his face was ugly. "You think you are clever, do not you?" Thomas said, his voice low and angry. "Sinking your claws into Zimmerman, but he will figure out what you are eventually. They always do." "There is nothing to figure out," Miranda said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "You are the liar, Thomas. You stole money and blamed me when I caught you. That is the truth, and deep down you know it. Truth is what people believe," Thomas spat. "And I made sure this town believes you are nothing but a cheap harlot. You will never recover from that. Even if Zimmerman marries you out of misplaced pity, you will always be tainted goods. Get away from her." Lucas's voice cut through the air like a whip crack. He stood at the corner of the building, and the expression on his face was something Miranda had never seen before. Cold fury that made him look dangerous in a way his usual calm demeanor concealed. Thomas took a step back instinctively. "This is between me and my former fiancée." "You have no claim on her," Lucas said, moving to stand beside Miranda. His hand found hers, warm and solid and reassuring. "She ended that connection when she realized what kind of man you really are, a thief and a liar who destroys women to hide his own crimes." "You cannot prove that," Thomas said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Maybe not yet," Lucas agreed, "but I have been asking questions. Turns out the ranch you worked for, the one you stole from, they noticed the missing money eventually. Blamed it on poor bookkeeping and let it go because the amounts were small. But I talked to the bookkeeper, and she remembers you being very interested in the accounts around that time. Remembers you volunteering to help, which was unusual because you generally avoided extra work." Thomas's face had gone pale. "That proves nothing." "It proves enough to make people wonder," Lucas said. "And once people start wondering, they start looking closer. How many other places have you worked, Thomas? How many other accounts have you had access to?" "I am betting if someone checked, they would find a pattern." "You are bluffing," Thomas said, but he sounded less certain now. "Maybe I am," Lucas said. "Or maybe I already sent letters to the other towns you have worked in, asking about missing money. Guess we will find out when the replies come back." Thomas looked between them, his handsome face twisted with rage and fear. "You have not heard the last of this," he snarled, then turned and stalked away. Miranda realized she was shaking. Lucas squeezed her hand gently and led her to the small bench beside her door. They sat together in the afternoon heat, and Miranda tried to calm her racing heart. "Did you really send those letters?" she asked. "I did," Lucas confirmed. "I figured if Thomas was willing to destroy you to hide one theft, he has probably done it before. Men like him do not just suddenly turn bad. They have a history." "What if you are wrong?" Miranda whispered. "What if there is nothing to find?" "Then we will deal with that," Lucas said. He turned to face her, his green eyes serious. "But Miranda, I do not think I am wrong. I have been watching him, listening to how he talks. He is too comfortable with lying, too quick with explanations. That comes from practice." Miranda leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that felt natural despite the relative newness of their friendship. "I do not know how to thank you, for believing me, for helping me, for just being here." "You do not need to thank me," Lucas said softly. His arm came around her shoulders, holding her gently. "Miranda, I need you to know something. This started because I saw an injustice and wanted to fix it, but it has become more than that. You have become more than that." Miranda lifted her head to look at him, her breath catching at the intensity in his expression. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I am falling in love with you," Lucas said simply. "I know it is fast. I know the timing is complicated, but I cannot pretend otherwise. You are brave and kind and beautiful, and every day I spend with you makes me more certain that you are exactly who I have been looking for my whole life." Tears welled in Miranda's eyes, but they were the good kind, the kind that came from overwhelming emotion rather than pain. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I did not think I could feel this way again after Thomas. I thought he had broken something in me, but you make me feel whole." Lucas cupped her face in his calloused hands and leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Miranda did not want to. She closed her eyes and let him kiss her, a gentle press of lips that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. It was nothing like kissing Thomas had been. This was tender and real and full of promise. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. Lucas rested his forehead against hers and said, "We are going to get through this. Together. I promise you that." Miranda believed him. For the first time since her world fell apart, she believed in the future again. The replies to Lucas's letters started arriving 3 weeks later. The first came from a town in Nevada where Thomas had worked 2 years before Miranda met him. The ranch owner confirmed that small amounts had gone missing from their accounts during Thomas's employment, but they had never been able to prove anything. The second letter came from Colorado, telling a similar story. By the time the third letter arrived, enough people in Kelton had heard about the investigation that Thomas's support began to crumble in earnest. The town banker, Mr. Morrison, came to find Lucas at the Copper Creek Ranch one evening. Miranda was there having dinner with Lucas and some of the other ranch hands, a weekly tradition they had established. Mr. Morrison looked uncomfortable but determined. "Mr. Zimmerman, Miss Bennett, I owe you both an apology," he said without preamble. "I believed Thomas Hartley when he spoke against Miranda. I should have questioned his story more carefully. The letters you have been receiving, they paint a very different picture of his character." "An apology is a start," Lucas said carefully. "But what Miss Bennett really needs is for this town to acknowledge the truth publicly. Her reputation has been destroyed based on lies. That damage needs to be repaired." Mr. Morrison nodded. "I have been speaking with Reverend Matthews and some of the other town leaders. We would like to hold a meeting, let you present the evidence you have gathered, and allow Thomas to respond if he chooses. It is not perfect justice, but it is what we can offer." Miranda felt Lucas's hand find hers under the table. "What do you think?" he asked her quietly. "It is your decision." Miranda thought about the 6 months of hell she had endured, the loneliness and shame and constant fear. She thought about how Thomas had taken away her livelihood, her community, her sense of self-worth. And she thought about Lucas, standing beside her through all of it, believing in her when no one else would. "I think we should do it," she said. "I want everyone to know the truth." The meeting was held in the church on a Sunday afternoon when most of the town could attend. The pews were packed with curious onlookers, some sympathetic, others still skeptical. Miranda sat in the front row with Lucas beside her, his hand holding hers openly now. They were past worrying about appearances. Reverend Matthews stood at the pulpit and called the meeting to order. "We are here to address serious accusations that have divided our community. Mr. Zimmerman has brought forward evidence suggesting that Thomas Hartley has lied about Miss Bennett's character to cover his own misdeeds. Thomas, are you here to answer these charges?" Thomas stood from a pew in the back, his face a mask of wounded innocence. "I am here, though I do not understand why I should have to defend myself against the word of a drifter who has been in town barely 2 months. "The evidence speaks for itself," Lucas said, standing. He had the letters in his hand, and he read them aloud one by one. The accounts of missing money, of suspicious behavior, of Thomas leaving jobs under questionable circumstances. When he finished, the church was silent. "That does not prove I lied about Miranda," Thomas said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Maybe I made mistakes in the past, but that has nothing to do with her behavior." "You told everyone she was meeting men for money," Lucas said, his voice cutting through the church. "You said you had witnesses." "I have been in this town for months now, and I have yet to meet a single person who actually saw anything improper. All they can tell me is that you said it happened. So I am asking you now, in front of everyone, name one witness who actually saw Miranda do anything wrong." Thomas's face flushed red. "There were people, I do not remember their names. It was months ago." "Because they do not exist," Miranda said, finding her voice. She stood beside Lucas, her legs shaking but her voice clear. "You made up those stories because I caught you stealing and you needed to discredit me before I could tell anyone. You broke into my room and destroyed the documents I had copied. You turned this entire town against me to save your own skin." "She is lying," Thomas said desperately. "You are all going to believe her over me. I am a Hartley. My family built this town." "Your family built this town honestly," Mr. Morrison said, standing. "Which is more than can be said for you, it seems. Thomas, I have reviewed the accounts at my bank more carefully over the past week. There are irregularities in the deposits you made while you were courting Miranda, amounts that do not match your salary. Where did that extra money come from?" Thomas looked around the church wildly, seeing the doubt on faces that had once supported him unconditionally. "This is ridiculous. I do not have to listen to this." He turned to leave, but Sheriff Coleman stood and blocked the aisle. "Actually, Thomas, I think you do, because if there is evidence you have been stealing, that is a criminal matter, and I take that seriously, no matter what your last name is." Thomas's face crumbled. In that moment, the charming mask slipped completely, and Miranda saw the frightened, mean-spirited man beneath. "It was just small amounts," he said desperately. "No one was going to miss it. I needed the money to maintain my position in society. My family has expectations." The admission rang through the church like a bell. Miranda felt Lucas's arm come around her waist, steadying her as relief and vindication washed over her in equal measure. "And Miranda," Reverend Matthews prompted, "what about the accusations you made against her?" Thomas would not meet Miranda's eyes. "I needed people to think she was unstable, untrustworthy, so no one would believe her if she told anyone about the money. It just spiraled out of control." "You destroyed my life," Miranda said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You took everything from me. My job, my friends, my reputation, and you did it to cover up your own crimes." "I am sorry," Thomas said, but the apology sounded hollow. "I never meant for it to go this far." "But it did," Sheriff Coleman said grimly. "Thomas Hartley, you are under arrest for theft and for bearing false witness. We will sort out the full extent of your crimes, but for now, you are coming with me." The sheriff led Thomas from the church in handcuffs, and the congregation erupted in whispers. Reverend Matthews called for quiet, then turned to Miranda with genuine remorse in his eyes. "Miss Bennett, this community owes you a profound apology. We allowed ourselves to believe the worst of you without evidence, and we made your life unbearable as a result. That is a failing we must all reckon with. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us, though I know we do not deserve it." Miranda looked around the church at the faces of people who had shunned her, insulted her, treated her like dirt for 6 months. Part of her wanted to rage at them, to make them feel even a fraction of the pain they had caused her. But she was so tired of anger, so tired of fighting. And Lucas's hand in hers reminded her that she had won something far more valuable than revenge. She had won her truth back, and she had found love in the process. "I forgive you," she said quietly, "but I will not forget. And I hope this town learned something from what happened. Do not be so quick to believe accusations without proof. Do not let one person's lies destroy another person's life. Be better than you were to me." The church was silent for a long moment, then Mrs. Patterson stood from her pew. "Miss Bennett is right. We should all be ashamed, and we should do better." She looked around at the other women present. "I propose we help Miranda in practical ways. She lost her job, her savings, everything. The least we can do is help her rebuild." Other voices joined in, offering work, offering assistance, offering the support they should have given her months ago. Miranda felt tears streaming down her face, but Lucas was there, holding her steady, his presence a constant reminder that she was not alone anymore. After the meeting, people approached Miranda one by one to apologize. Some seemed genuinely remorseful, others were just embarrassed at being caught on the wrong side of the truth. Miranda accepted their apologies with as much grace as she could muster, but she knew things would never be quite the same. She had learned too much about human nature to trust blindly again. As the sun set and the crowd dispersed, Lucas walked Miranda home through the cooling evening air. They did not speak much, both processing everything that had happened. When they reached her door, Lucas pulled her into his arms and held her tightly. "You were amazing in there," he said into her hair. "So strong, so graceful. I am in awe of you." "I could not have done it without you," Miranda said, her face pressed against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and reassuring. "You gave me back my voice. You believed in me when no one else would. I do not know how to repay that." "Marry me," Lucas said. Miranda pulled back to look at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "Marry me," Lucas repeated, his green eyes intense and sincere. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few months. But Miranda, I am more certain of you than I have ever been of anything in my life. I love you. I want to build a life with you here or anywhere else you want to go. Say yes." Miranda felt joy bubble up inside her like a spring. After so much darkness, this moment of pure happiness felt almost surreal. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, of course I will marry you." Lucas kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were breathless and smiling. "I do not have a ring yet," Lucas admitted, "but I will get you one, the prettiest one I can find." "I do not need a ring," Miranda said, touching his face gently. "I just need you." They were married 3 weeks later in the same church where Miranda's name had been cleared. Mrs. Patterson helped her make a simple white dress, and the women of the town, eager to make amends, decorated the church with wildflowers from the surrounding desert. Lucas wore his best clothes and could not stop smiling from the moment Miranda walked down the aisle. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony with solemnity and warmth, speaking about redemption and second chances and the power of truth. When Lucas kissed his bride, the small congregation applauded, and Miranda felt a sense of belonging she had thought lost forever. They had a modest reception at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, with food and music and genuine celebration. Even Mr. Gunderson came, offering Miranda her old job back if she wanted it. She declined politely, explaining that she and Lucas were planning to start fresh on a small piece of land north of town, that the Copper Creek Ranch was selling them at a fair price. As the evening wore on and the guests began to drift away, Lucas and Miranda found themselves alone on the porch of the boarding house, looking up at the vast expanse of stars overhead. Lucas had his arm around her waist, and Miranda leaned into his warmth, marveling at how much her life had changed. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Choosing to stand by me, you could have had an easier life if you had just ignored what was happening." "Never," Lucas said firmly. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Miranda, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. I would choose you 1,000 times over, no matter the cost. You make me want to be a better man, and you make me believe in goodness even when the world seems dark. That is not something to regret. That is something to treasure." Miranda kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. When they broke apart, she said, "I love you, Lucas Zimmerman. Thank you for seeing who I really am." "I love you too, Miranda Zimmerman," Lucas said, and the sound of her new name made her smile. "Always have, always will." They moved into their small ranch house a month after the wedding, a sturdy structure that Lucas had spent weeks preparing. It was not large or fancy, but it had strong walls, a good roof, and a view of the mountains that took Miranda's breath away every morning. Lucas worked hard improving the land and building their herd, and Miranda discovered a talent for managing their accounts and planning for the future. Together, they built something real and lasting. Thomas Hartley was tried for his crimes and sentenced to 5 years in territorial prison. His family, humiliated by his actions, left Kelton for California, unable to face the town they had once dominated. Miranda found she felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only relief that he could not hurt anyone else the way he had hurt her. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Lucas proved to be everything Miranda had hoped for in a husband, thoughtful and passionate and unfailingly supportive. They worked side by side during the day and held each other close at night, building not just a ranch but a life filled with love and mutual respect. 2 years after their wedding, Miranda gave Lucas the news that she was expecting their first child. He picked her up and spun her around despite her laughing protests, then immediately began fretting about whether she should be working so hard and what they needed to prepare for the baby's arrival. Miranda loved him for his concern, but insisted she was perfectly capable of continuing her normal routine for months yet. Their son was born on a crisp October morning in 1884, coming into the world with a lusty cry that announced his presence to anyone within earshot. They named him Samuel, after Lucas's father, and from the moment Lucas held his son for the first time, Miranda knew she had never seen him happier. He was a devoted father, patient and playful, and watching him with their child made Miranda fall in love with him all over again. The town of Kelton had changed in the 2 years since Miranda's vindication. The incident with Thomas had made people more cautious about accepting accusations without proof, more willing to consider multiple sides of a story. It was not a perfect transformation, but it was progress. Miranda found herself welcomed back into the community in ways that would have been impossible before. She helped at church socials, contributed to town initiatives, and slowly rebuilt friendships that had been destroyed by Thomas's lies. When Samuel was 6 months old, Miranda took him into town to the general store. Mr. Gunderson, who had been one of the first to apologize and try to make amends, immediately came around the counter to admire the baby. "He has his father's eyes," Mr. Gunderson said with a smile. "And I imagine he will have his father's good character too, with you and Lucas raising him." "We certainly hope so," Miranda said, adjusting the blanket around Samuel's small face. "We want him to grow up knowing the importance of truth and standing up for what is right." "He will learn that from watching you both," Mr. Gunderson said. "If you do not mind me saying, Miranda, you and Lucas have become an inspiration to this town. The way you forgave us, the way you built a good life despite everything that happened. It gives people hope that mistakes can be overcome." Miranda felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you, Mr. Gunderson. That means more than you know." As she walked home with Samuel in her arms, Miranda reflected on how far she had come. 3 years ago, she had been broken and alone, certain her life was ruined beyond repair. Now she had a husband who adored her, a beautiful son, a home she had helped build, and a community that had learned to see her truly. It was not the life she had imagined when she was young, but it was better because it had been earned through hardship and tested by fire. Lucas was working in the corral when she arrived home, breaking a young horse with the patient skill he brought to everything. He looked up when he heard her approach, and his face lit up with the smile he reserved just for her and Samuel. He secured the horse and came to meet them, dropping a kiss on Miranda's lips before taking Samuel from her arms. "How was town?" he asked, holding their son up and making silly faces that elicited delighted gurgles. "Good," Miranda said, watching her 2 favorite people with a full heart. "People are kind. Things are good." "Things are very good," Lucas agreed. He wrapped one arm around Miranda's waist, keeping Samuel secure in the other, and pulled her close. "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" Miranda asked, leaning into his warmth. "About how lucky I am," Lucas said simply. "I rode into Kelton 3 years ago with nothing but a horse and a bedroll. Now I have you and Samuel and this land, and a life I never dreamed possible. All because I saw a woman being treated poorly and decided I could not just stand by." "I am the lucky one," Miranda countered. "You saved me, Lucas. In every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Lucas said, kissing the top of her head. "And we are going to keep building this beautiful life together. You, me, Samuel, and however many more children we are blessed with. We are going to fill this house with love and laughter, and we are going to show the world what is possible when people choose truth over lies and love over fear." Miranda looked up at him, this good man who had seen her when she was invisible, believed her when no one else would, and loved her through the darkest time of her life. "That sounds perfect," she said softly. "That sounds like exactly the life I want." They stood there in the golden afternoon light, a family bound together by love and forged in the fires of adversity. The past could not be changed, but it had led them to this moment, to this place, to each other. And that, Miranda thought, was a kind of redemption all its own. As the years passed, the Zimmerman ranch prospered. Lucas's reputation as an honest dealer and skilled cattleman spread through the territory, and their herd grew steadily. Miranda managed their finances with careful precision, ensuring they always had enough set aside for hard times while still living comfortably. They added rooms to the house as their family grew, welcoming 2 more children over the next 5 years. A daughter they named Catherine, and another son they called James. Samuel grew into a thoughtful, serious boy who adored his younger siblings and followed his father around the ranch, learning everything he could. Catherine was spirited and fearless, climbing trees and riding horses, almost before she could walk properly. James was the baby, cheerful and affectionate, always ready with hugs and laughter. The house was never quiet, never dull, and exactly as full of love as Lucas had predicted. Miranda sometimes thought about those dark months when the whole town had turned against her based on lies. The memories no longer hurt as sharply as they once had, softened by time and happiness. But she never forgot the lessons learned. She taught her children to value truth above popularity, to stand up for those who were being treated unjustly, and to never judge someone based solely on what others said about them. Lucas remained her constant partner in everything, as devoted on their 10th anniversary as he had been on their wedding day. They worked side by side, raised their children together, and fell into bed exhausted and content each night. Their love had been tested by fire and come out stronger, a bond that nothing could break. On a warm evening in June of 1894, the Zimmerman family gathered on their porch to watch the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Samuel was 12 now, already tall and capable, helping significantly with the ranch work. Catherine was 8, her dark hair in braids, regaling them with a story about a snake she had found near the creek. James was 6, content to sit on his mother's lap and watch the changing colors of the sky. Lucas sat beside Miranda with his arm around her shoulders, the picture of contentment. "Tell us the story again," Catherine demanded suddenly, interrupting her own tale. "About how Papa came to town and saved Mama." Miranda and Lucas exchanged glances, smiling. Their children loved hearing about how their parents met, though they edited the more painful details for young ears. "Well," Lucas began, his voice taking on the storytelling cadence the children loved, "I rode into Kelton on a hot summer day, looking for work and a place to rest. And I saw the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, standing in a general store looking like she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders." "And then what happened?" James asked, even though he knew the story by heart. "Then I realized she was in trouble," Lucas continued. "Bad people were saying mean things about her that were not true, and I knew I could not just walk away, so I decided to help her." "Because you are a hero," Catherine declared firmly. "No, because doing the right thing is not heroic, it is just what you should do," Lucas corrected gently. "Your mama is the real hero of the story. She stayed strong even when everything was terrible. She did not give up or let the lies break her spirit. That takes real courage." "And then you fell in love," Samuel said, at the age where romance was simultaneously fascinating and embarrassing. "And then we fell in love," Miranda confirmed, kissing the top of James's head. "Because your papa saw who I really was, not what people said about me. He looked past all the ugliness and saw something worth loving." "That was easy," Lucas said, squeezing her shoulder. "Because you have always been extraordinary." As the sun finally dipped below the mountains and the first stars began to appear, Miranda reflected on the long journey that had brought her to this moment. She had been broken down, built back up, tested and strengthened. She had learned that love could come from unexpected places, that truth eventually prevailed, and that the human capacity for forgiveness and growth was remarkable. She looked at Lucas, still handsome in the fading light, and thought about the young cowboy who had ridden into town 12 years ago and changed her life forever. He had given her back her dignity, her hope, and her future. In return, she had given him her heart, her loyalty, and the family they had built together. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked softly, noticing her contemplative expression. "About how grateful I am," Miranda said simply. "For you, for our children, for this life we have made. For the day you looked at me and said you saw who I really was, that changed everything." "You changed everything," Lucas corrected, bringing her hand to his lips. "You made me believe in second chances and the power of standing up for what is right. You made me better, Miranda. You still do, every single day." The children had run off to catch fireflies in the gathering dusk, their laughter floating back on the evening breeze. Miranda leaned her head on Lucas's shoulder and watched them play, these beautiful souls they had created together. She thought about Thomas Hartley sometimes, wondered if prison had changed him, or if he was still the same selfish, frightened man who had tried to destroy her. Mostly, though, she did not think about him at all. He was the past, and her focus was firmly on the present and future. "Do you ever regret staying in Kelton?" Lucas asked. It was a question he posed occasionally, always wanting to make sure she was happy. "We could still move somewhere new, somewhere without the memories." "No," Miranda said firmly. "This is home. These people learned and grew, and so did we. Besides, I want our children to know that you do not have to run from hard things. You can face them, overcome them, and build something beautiful in their place." "You are wise, Mrs. Zimmerman," Lucas said with a smile. "I had a good teacher," Miranda replied, kissing him softly. They sat together in comfortable silence as the night deepened and the stars multiplied overhead. The children eventually tired of their game and came back to the porch, yawning and ready for bed. Lucas carried James inside while Miranda shepherded the older two, both families' worth of love and laughter and the comfortable chaos of bedtime routines. Later, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Miranda and Lucas stood together at their bedroom window looking out over the land they had built into a thriving ranch. Lucas's arms were wrapped around her from behind and she leaned back against his chest, perfectly content. "I love you," Lucas said into her hair. "More than I did yesterday, less than I will tomorrow." "I love you too," Miranda replied. "Forever and always, no matter what." And she meant it with every fiber of her being. Lucas Zimmerman had ridden into her life when it was at its darkest point and brought light back into her world. He had seen past the lies and the pain to the woman beneath, and he had loved her with a steadiness that never wavered. Together they had built a life rich in love, strong in truth, and full of promise for the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Miranda knew they would face them together. They had already weathered the worst storm and come out stronger on the other side. They had proven that love rooted in truth and respect could withstand any test, and they had created a family that would carry those values forward into the next generation. As Miranda drifted off to sleep in Lucas's arms that night, she thought about the girl she had been all those years ago, working in the general store and dreaming of a better life. She could never have imagined the path that would lead her here, through darkness and pain, but ultimately to joy. But she would not change a single moment, because every trial had been necessary to bring her to this place, to this man, to this beautiful life they had built together. The cowboy had said he saw who she really was, and in doing so, he had helped her see it too. She was strong, she was worthy, she was loved. And that truth, hard-won and precious, would stay with her forever. The years continued their steady march forward, bringing changes and challenges as all years do. The ranch expanded, the children grew, and the Zimmerman name became synonymous with honesty and hard work throughout the territory. When Utah achieved statehood in 1896, Lucas and Miranda celebrated with their neighbors, proud to be part of the new state's foundation. Samuel eventually took over much of the day-to-day ranch operations, proving himself as capable and honorable as his father. Catherine surprised everyone by developing a talent for training horses, gentling even the wildest mustangs with patience and skill. James showed an aptitude for business and began handling the financial aspects of the ranch, working alongside his mother to ensure continued prosperity. As Lucas and Miranda grew older together, their love only deepened. They had weathered storms, both literal and figurative, celebrated triumphs and mourned losses, and through it all remained each other's greatest support and truest companion. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party that brought the whole town out to celebrate. Miranda looked around at the smiling faces, the genuine affection, and marveled at how different this was from those dark days when she had been an outcast. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked, sliding his arm around her waist in the familiar gesture that still made her heart flutter. "I am thinking about how far we have come," Miranda said. "About how a single act of kindness and courage changed both our lives forever. About how grateful I am that you rode into Kelton that day and decided I was worth fighting for." "Best decision I ever made," Lucas said, kissing her temple. "And I would make it again in a heartbeat." They danced together as the sun set over the mountains, surrounded by family and friends, their love story now woven into the fabric of the town that had once rejected her. It was a happy ending that had been earned through struggle and sacrifice, made sweeter by the trials they had overcome together. And when Miranda looked into Lucas's eyes that evening, she saw the same devotion and wonder that had been there on their wedding day 25 years before. He still saw her, truly saw her, just as he had promised he always would. And she saw him too, this good man who had taught her that love based on truth and respect could heal even the deepest wounds. Their story had started with lies and rejection, but it had transformed into something beautiful and lasting. A testament to the power of standing up for what is right, of seeing people for who they truly are rather than what others claim them to be, and of love that chooses to believe the best rather than accept the worst. As the celebration continued around them, and their children laughed with friends old and new, Lucas and Miranda held each other close and looked toward the future with hope and contentment. They had built something precious together, a legacy of love and truth that would outlast them both. And that, they both knew, was the greatest achievement of all. The story that had begun with a cowboy saying, "I see who you really are," had become a lifetime of being truly seen, truly known, and truly loved. And Miranda Zimmerman, who had once been broken by lies, had been made whole by truth and love. It was a happy ending, well deserved, and a love story that would be remembered for generations to come.